All right. Hello, Vincent.
Hey, Pranab.
So today we are reading Cate Hall's latest essay, Fuck Willpower. Winners Take Shortcuts. So we just read it together and we have thoughts. So yeah. Yeah. What's your I can give my general take. What's your general take?
Is good, makes sense. If more people internalize this, it'd be great.
Yeah, it's basically the same. All right, Ed Cole. Yeah, dude. I feel like this is the kind of it's one of those essays where I'm just like it's it's a concept I've had in my mind for a long time, and I've just been like, why don't people see this? I remember reading Grit by Angela Duckworth and thinking
Mhm.
like, this is just bullshit. Like it's all just wrong. Uh, and I think yeah, I have a friend that actually you are too. But anyways, we have a friend that worked at her lab and changed my mind a little bit about it. But I still generally have the gist that like it's pointing to something, but it's not actually addressing the mechanism behind it or something like that.
Mhm.
And I think Kate gets at this pretty well here.
Yeah, I I'm kind of two minds about this. One is I think willpower at its best operates effortlessly, and I think she points that out very well. And at the same time, there's some kind of loopiness around. Um, some people can get stuck because they don't feel like they have competency, and then that just spirals. And there's a way in which pushing yourself a little bit, not to the point of burning yourself, but like to the point of being able to expand your capacity and gaining self trust and things like that. She also kind of points that out at the end of the essay, something kind of along these lines. But I think doing that also seems good and helps
Yeah,
that sort of unclenching on the other side.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I think it's like yeah, same page. I think it's an artifact that names a thing that has been kind of in the latent space that like willpower is not really real. And I think it gets at the mechanism and around self trust. For me, the word that comes up is alignment, like inner alignment.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but I kind of I have I don't think it goes far enough, and I almost am like I have thoughts on how she could have just like really ended it in a way that just like gets at the actual mechanism of
Mm.
inner coherence in a way that like really represents willpower. But I thought it just kind of skirted it without really kind of nailing it.
Mm. I'm curious to hear what your articulation of that would be.
Yeah, so took notes.
Nice.
My readwise. Um, yeah, yeah. So there's there's something here we can comment on. I think yeah. So at the very end, she's saying what I'm saying is that you should choose hard work if hard work is the desired result. If it's not, then you can take a shortcut, and you can take a shortcut, take a fucking shortcut. And I think a lot of what she's getting at is environmental design and kind
Hmm.
of managing external triggers and cues and kind of the external shape of things.
Yeah.
Um, which I think is great and I think makes a ton of sense. But there is still an internal component that willpower was kind of pointing at that I just don't think is pointing at very well. And in my sense, the thing that I think the internal thing is like people. There are people who kind of move through the world being able to do what they want, and like what is executive function. So it's maybe it's, but I don't really know what the collective like the mutually exclusive thing is, but there's some combination of enough metacognition to like name a goal. There's enough of like clear seeing of uh, knowing how to get to that goal. There's a level of openness on uh, being able to kind of then like take action towards it, or yeah. And then there's the whole thing around like being with the emotional intensity that is required.
Hmm.
Um, Yeah. Okay, that's a little fuzzy. But the thing that I do feel confident about is willpower is like it's kind of like a pointing out instruction. Like some people hear David Goggins and they're like, "Oh yeah, just do it, man, just willpower," and then they actually do it. Like it does work, but it's not like reproducible. It's not like representative of a mechanism. But sometimes for some people, even just thinking about it as a concept does work, and that I
Hmm.
think is interesting.
Yeah. The thing that I've been on about lately that seems relevant here is thinking about things in terms of yin and yang. And so yin
Mm,
is the path of unclenching and unresisting all the way down, such that you realize you are always already loved. And from that place, you get freedom. You get freedom to choose different things, freedom to choose different strategies. And the path of yang is the path of building your potential and sort
mm,
of learning skills and learning how to do things, learning new strategies, because you can have as much freedom as you want, but if you only have like two shit strategies, that's not going to get you anywhere. And so in my
yeah, yeah,
mind, the sort of Silicon Valley sort of you're doing the grind set, you're doing the willpower thing, you're doing the agency thing. Often they're way over indexing on the yang thing. Like you got to build you at the cost of everything. You got to build your skills, you got to build your strategies, you got to work those late hours at the neglect of the yin. And at the same time, I think if you over index on the yin without enough I get the sense that like people can hit like a local minima and get stuck. And then it looks more like flopping around and avoiding stuff rather than like actually getting over the hump. That like sometimes that hump is emotional alignment if you have enough sort of safety and spaciousness. And sometimes getting over the hump does mean like you just got to do the thing and break through. And
yep,
then from there you get to like do the spiral of okay, attune to yourself, where are you at, and so on.
yeah, 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 totally. Poking into that, what do you think that willpower, as it's commonly known, is basically purely yang? Because that's what it feels like to me, and it's almost like a unintegrated yang. It's
Yeah.
like a less refined version or something.
I think okay, maybe it is to do with where it's motivated from. And
Mm,
so I think there's a way. I was having this realization a while ago when I was working with a coach doing Muay Thai of like, oh, this person is pushing me all the way to my edge, and all of my cylinders are firing, and I'm like exhausted. And you know, if it were up to me, I'd maybe just stop. But there's a way in which like I can non-coercively push myself to the edge, and it still feel really good. And I
yeah,
think there's something of like the really healthy yang is being aligned to this higher order purpose, such that you're
yeah,
pulled towards it rather than like pushing yourself um, from the back from like a bunch of shoulds.
yep,
And I
yep,
wonder if that's the difference. Like finding the yin is in part discovering what this higher order thing is, such that you're sort of just pulled towards it from both ends.
yep. And kind of for that example for you, what was the role of the coach in from your stance there?
So the way that I phrase it is like a really good coach is like a psycho spiritual exoskeleton.
Mm,
So he kind of extends my capacity in the moment, provides the ground, and like can feel exactly into where that edge is, and knows how to push me in a way that expands my capacity without burning me out,
yeah,
and
yeah,
without having that like really harsh rebound.
yeah. And how would you kind of map that relationship to yin yang, if it makes sense? Like, is there are you more of the yang? He's bringing the yin. I mean, of course, like the whole point is that it's both combined
Right.
and whatever, right? But yeah, curious if you notice or could comment on how that's mapped in this situation.
I would say that that is the function of good tough love.
Mm,
So good tough love is like, I know you can do better. I can see that you're tired, but I'm gonna keep on pushing you so that you can fulfill that potential. Versus, I could imagine a yin version of that might be something like, hey, push as far as you want, and then take rest. And like you're gonna be self guided in like what you want to do. Maybe you want to do kicks today. Maybe you want to do something else. Like attune to where you're at, and then go for it.
yeah, yeah. And I almost get a there's almost like a developmental sense I'm getting there, like
Yeah.
earlier on. Actually, before I point suggest it, what do you think? How do you think you would have related to this like 4 years ago or something?
I've so it's swung. I think 4 or 5
Yeah,
years ago, I've been like, okay, so this is because I was a lot more sort of in my head, a lot more.
yeah,
I bought this grind set thing a lot more, and then I went
yeah,
through the dip of like, no, you got to be non-coercive,
yeah,
maximally
yeah,
non-coercive as much as possible, and then that would have kind of just sucked.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, what's came up for me is like thinking about how that would apply for me. I think early on, it would have been this thing of yeah, and I think people early on like almost just need the direct structure, just do this. It's
Totally.
not that personalized, just do, and you almost like you the only learning is through conditioning, or typically the only learning is through conditioning yourself. And then I think we all, especially in the teapot world, hit like some peak of that, of like, oh, I've hit the max of coercion and conditioning myself. How do I do things from a place of unconditioning? Or how do I do things while I'm unconditioning is probably a
Right.
more explicit way of saying it.
Yeah.
And it's tricky because if you've only ever learned how to do from a conditioned place, doing from unconditioned doesn't make much sense or is just really hard. So we end up just not doing much at all. It's like, oh, the airy fairy, like inner work all the time kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I am pretty interested in this question of what does it mean, one, to actually be functional throughout that process, like that messy
Hmm.
middle of transferring one's fuel from a place of conditioned to more unconditioned spontaneity. And what are like good examples of what like someone that supports you in doing that look like? And what does the end result look like? What does it actually look like when someone's like a bit more integrated, more coherent, and coming from that, you know, spontaneous place or something?
Right. Where are you at with this right now? Like, have you seen glimpses of each of these pieces? Do you have models of where you want to drive yourself?
Yeah, totally. And I think it's interesting because there's of course the whole like lifestyle design component of this, like Paul Millard Pathless Path, Tim Ferriss lifestyle design, like design your life. There's that whole thing that I was super on from like 2017, 2018 to like I mean still now, but like especially back then to those few years. And then and like more recently there's kind of the more Joe Hudson-y, how can I enjoy this 10% more? Like
Yeah.
whatever I'm doing right now, no matter what it is, even if it's like terrible, how can I just be with the experience and enjoy it more? And I think it's a mix of both. And yeah, I would say I think I've always thought of myself. I had always thought of myself as a lazy person that procrastinated. Uh, and then I realized, and then like even my psychedelic journeys, the insight from all those was just be a better person at work the way you are for your friends and family. And it's like, oh
Hmm.
man, I needed the mushrooms to tell me that, which is funny. Yeah, nothing crazy, just live a simple life. But anyways, but
Those are
then
the best
from that,
insights.
huh?
Those are the best ones.
The vast, yeah, and after that, I just stopped. I was like, okay, I'm good. Um, yeah, and then I think like, yeah, I think in the process, I've kind of, for me, got super deep into the whole, non-dual meditation thing, IFS, and all the emotional work stuff. And I think, yeah, that sense of like inner coherence in my mind, I think is actually the way forward. Like the model to kind of, I think it's helpful to have a model for how stuff works. And my model is you want to move to an inner coherence. In the short run, that means just bringing a sense of more acceptance to your current experience and bringing a sense of more welcoming. And I say bringing a sense because it's not, you can't just do it. It's a stance that's cultivated. So it's like a skill development over time. And there's various levels to it. And then separately, there's then taking that and then just like making actions, like macro actions in life that make it so it's easier to do that whole process. So it's like a mix of the minor in the moment, like doing the day to day stuff from a place of more awareness, and then the macro, okay, cool, making the big swings and doing the experiments that lead to a more aligned life. But I think we're kind of over adjusted to like live a super aligned life, like take a sabbatical, do all that stuff. And then I think the people that are on this side, the more yang side of like just do the thing, don't emphasize this at all. And I think the way forward is like do the thing, really pay attention to how you do the thing, and just iterate on that from an experimental point of view. But also be kind. That's like, yeah, that's like the TLDR for my whole view there.
I love that. Yeah. It's reminding me of like, so there's the kind of two. This is a different way of articulating the same thing, but like there's two ways to overcorrect, right? One is you keep on shitting yourself, and it's something like a super egoic structure where you have like these external things that you're pushing and prodding yourself with. And then people are like, well, if I just become happy, I'm not going to do anything. And you fall into this other pit of like, you just
Yeah,
smoke weed and play video games all day. And I think
yeah,
that's what unresisting means. But to
mm,
me, that is like you get to that point through avoiding a bunch of stuff. Like, yes, you kind
Mm.
of destructure some things, but it's still out of a really deep avoidance of, for example, discomfort and things like that.
Yeah.
Exactly, not doing what you're saying of like welcoming in the stance, taking the stance of welcoming all the stuff that's happening,
Yeah.
and I'm like, okay, well, the really deep integration is if you can be really, if you can have a at the very least a very okay time doing your taxes,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
really deep inner coherence, right? It's not
Yeah.
you're just happy and having a good time all the time.
Yeah.
It's you cohering and aligned towards this thing, and the energy
Yeah.
flows, and that
Dude,
could look like being uncomfortable. Yeah,
100%. Yeah. Yeah. But it's like there's a way of doing it. The stance that it's coming from is less coercive, less should. And
right.
it's developmental. Maybe at first it is. Later it's like you're partially, but you're noticing it and you are still in touch with the actual want behind it. And then over time it actually just becomes easier. But there's kind of a bootstrap problem at first of like how do you
Yeah.
kind of still do the thing while not fueling the initial motivation, I think. Um, Also, do you know about the new service thing I launched
Yeah,
recently?
I was just gonna ask you about this.
Yeah, dude,
How
because
are
it's like
you?
it's good, man.
Figuring
Dude, it's
this
kind of funny
out.
because
Yeah,
yeah, this whole thing is basically just like, oh my god, it's like it's almost just like it's hard to not have it seem like a plug for my thing
yeah.
because literally this is the
Right.
entire point that I'm trying to. This is the entire thing I'm doing,
Yeah.
which I think is really funny. But yeah, like it's called attentional co-piloting, and it's basically just like how do we literally bring that stance to your current thing right now,
Hmm.
um, especially with the work someone's avoiding, and yeah, and I it's been cool, man, dude. I've done like 30 sessions in the last 10
Oh
days
yeah.
or something. Yeah,
Wow. Nice.
so, or 2 weeks almost since launch. Yeah.
How do you see yourself? Like, what do you see yourself as? What do you see your role as? While you're guiding people through.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of interesting. So there's basically like there's kind of the like there's like the it's not even normie because it's like it's still pretty teapot, but there's like the typical teapot version, and there's kind of the there's the Dharma Bro version, not Dharma Bro, but you know the Dharma version. So the typical version is okay, cool, like bring a sense of like everyone's doing all these practices like IFS, somatic experiencing, AOA type stuff, just meditation in general, maybe some jhana practice. And how do you bring your practices to your work or bring the things that you're doing in those practices to the way you do your work? It's honestly a very Zen approach. Like Zen is very much like fully integrated, just show up with your practice and all of life.
Yeah.
But Zen's like not very hot these days, or you know, like the new thing. And I also don't think they explicitly they do. I also don't think they make things as explicit as one kind of needs
Hmm.
these days. But yeah, it's basically just like cool. You kind of already know how to go into a sense of presence. You already know what like awareness or metacognition feels like. You already kind of know that emotions are important and there are blocks. Just
Hmm.
remember all of that as you do work.
Hmm.
So a lot of what I'm doing is after kind of setting up some sense of ground and spaciousness, like every few minutes, bringing a mindfulness thing of like, what are you noticing? What are you noticing? It's almost like verbal noting
Hmm.
as the thing is happening. And then when you just bring a lot of noticings in, you'll just be like, oh, I'm actually stressed right now. My shoulders are hunched. Whoa, I didn't realize I hunch my shoulders all the time.
Hmm.
And it's really kind of the same mechanism of shamatha to vipassana. It's like when you bring a lot of awareness or attention to a thing, you'll just notice stuff. So then insight happens. And the more you notice
Hmm.
stuff, insight on the nature of how your work happens. So that's like the basic version of just, you know, bring awareness, insights will happen. It's like the kind of, you know. Then there's the non-dual version, which is if you can already kind of abide in a state in a space of centralistness or openness or rigpa or whatever your best approximation of all that stuff is, which you know, there's so many enlightened people on Twitter, so I don't know, maybe there's a dime a dozen. But anyways, if you can do all that on retreat, what would it be like if like on day 4 of a retreat you just plopped a laptop and you opened up and you had to like do your taxes?
Hmm.
What would that feel like? It would feel really different, and it would
Yeah.
probably feel great. And like you might notice it's coming from like a place of non-doing or something.
Right.
Um, so that's the kind of like other vibe that I've been trying to cultivate. It's obviously not a thing I do all the time, or like maybe not, I shouldn't say it's not obvious, but it's still a practice, and it's definitely not easy because most of the time, anytime there's any bit of like, ugh, I'm like immediately a little bit more contracted and identified with that contraction. That's the main thing. Like there can still be contraction. It's just like the stance towards it and like the unblending from it. But yeah, that's my spiel.
What's your model of willpower here? Is it a like? Do you see it as a sensation that happens, a feeling that you kind of stay with? Is it more like a stance thing? Like how are you modeling
Yeah.
it?
I'm like I so in all of this work, I just don't think willpower is that useful of a concept.
Hmm.
Like there are wants and there are competing wants. That's basically it. Like there's like maybe a larger want that comes from a sense of space and comes from like your highest ideals and like
Hmm.
what you truly want with your life, or oh, I really care about my work, I really care about this thing. And then there's other wants in the form of like resistance, but there's still
Hmm.
wants like resistance and parts that come up. Maybe they're from conditioning and they're from this place of oh, but this is painful, or oh, when I was like 7 years old, I learned that not working hard was really bad and I gotta work hard all the time. But then there's another thing that, and there's all these layers of meh and contraction and stuff, right?
Hmm.
But they're all just wants, and we can just model it that way, and really clarifying the competing wants towards a sense of inner coherence, or at least space. That just gives a sense of space, and then we can kind of see where we want to have choice from.
Hmm.
And then by doing practices like like somatic experiencing, IFS type stuff, it ends up kind of befriending the wants and clarifying them in a way that like hopefully leads to the one that you truly want to come from being
Hmm.
the direction you move in. And again, this all takes time. So it's like, do you spend 8 hours a day doing this and not doing any work? No, you have to balance it with like actual task completion and like task deep work. But I have a sense that even just like a 20-30 minute start of your day where someone explores this stuff, it'll open up a lot more freedom for the rest of the day.
Hmm.
And that compounds like day after day.
So it sounds like the process is more and more clarifying all of the wants that you have, and then is the step the system will organize itself and cohere itself? Is there some
Yeah.
additional layer? Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
If you
There's
feel
there's
that,
kind of a go ahead.
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, and again, this is like, at least for the sessions I do, it's in the course of like an hour. I do have
Right.
this hypothesis and this like research angle, like what would happen if there was like a larger container over the course of a month or something. And there's all this stuff around like GTD, like Tiago Forte stuff as well. It's like, at what level are you doing this? Like, this is for within an hour. It's typically at the task level and at the level of like, what thing am I doing right now? But really, that's the Lego block, the Lego brick for all of life. Like, what am I doing right now? Why am I doing it? Sometimes the what am I doing right now can be at a larger time scale. So at the level of a project or a vision or something. So some kind of life clarification thing, or at the level of like a decision that has like larger implications. Uh, but it's basically the same process for all of it from what I can see so far. Um, yeah.
Nice, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you think is the primary causes of so like conflict is one. You have internal paths that are conflicting, so the path isn't clear. Are there other sort of structures, or is that the main one?
That's the main one. I think there's another if that's like if and that's kind of in my mind there's the coherence thing. It's like
Hmm.
how coherent is the mind? There are states of like total coherence where there's like full symmetry, like pointing to Andres and QRI's symmetry theory of valence whole thing. It's like if you're in like a deep jhana or like a super clean non-dual state, there's just full symmetry and just full Tao moving in a single forceful direction. Um, and often the mind is just energy is kind of tangled in all these different ways. So I would just call that the whole coherence thing. And yeah, within that, there's like competing wants, which we typically call resistance, that can be clarified and changed and shifted. And the whole like samskar structure, and there's all that stuff. Um, there's also, I think, and I think this is separate. I haven't really thought about this too much, but I've been going into attachment theory recently. Uh, and there's this whole thing in attachment theory on when the attachment system is active, which basically means the nervous system is activated. You have less activation in the exploration system, which I don't really know how so there's kind of, from this frame, there's attachment system, exploration system. When you're really secure and safe, you're kind of like always in exploration mode, which means you have like metacognition, openness, creativity, ideas. And when you feel unsafe, your attachment system's activated and online, and you're kind of like, and then, like anxious or avoidant or like moving inwards versus outwards, the general fight, flight, freeze thing. So that's a whole another thing too, where it's like sometimes you can have competing wants. You can have enough resistance or enough like entanglement such that like you get kind of like burnt here and there's not enough safety. So the idea is to like bring the sense of safety or contact with the sense of safety such that you can work with this stuff in a way that then opens up the exploration system. So then you can kind of like do more things in the world that then help with the knots. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And I think Romeo Stevens' threefold training thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's there's some way to kind of model it just basically like that as well, I think. Okay, I can't find the image, but yeah.
That seems good. Yeah. Yeah, there's something about this is kind of a tangent, but uh, different expressions of play is interesting to me. Like, I'm thinking about like kids who, they get the safety, and normally our concept of play would be something that feels very expressive, extroverted, that kind of thing. And I'm thinking about the other spectrum of that, where you're much more introspective. You're going inwards and you're playing in that kind of different dimension. And so it's making me think of the fact that channeling your wants can look very different. And one of the things that people, when they talk about willpower and agency, it's you're doing very visible, tangible, legible things in the world. And that's the only category that is like,
It's the
these are the
only
ones that make
axis.
sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
only
It's like the
accents.
only place that people say agency can be applied to.
Right. And so then there's the interesting question of like, well, what are the other ones look like?
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like I think like inner world, like inner exploration could be another axis, like agency over like exploring the mind and the psyche and various things there. Because it does require courage to go in and like feel the things that hurt. It's like
Yeah.
not easy stuff. Like
Right.
you actually often feel worse doing it. It's actually not that hard. It's not that fun.
Yeah.
But there's a certain like taste of purification fun to it after some point.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. What
Yeah.
other axes do you think there are?
Hmm. I wonder, because I had a friend of mine who we got in a discussion about children being there's something like children are naturally creative, and if you let every single children sort of loose, they will make all of these great things. And I'm like, that seems to be the case for most kids, but I would bet you that there's like that one kid who just fucking loves laying bricks.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's kind of the whole deal. And they're just
Oh,
like so
interesting.
happy doing that like single thing. Or whatever that version of that is, just like
Yeah.
this very simple basic thing to other people seems really mundane and uninteresting
Mm.
and not creative, but like that's sort of actually their life purpose. And being able to
Mm.
recognize that and not see that as something that is less or more blocked or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
that feels to me more like an immersion into that world than maybe what we typically think of as play.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I thought you were gonna go down the addiction angle. It's like, oh, some kids will just be on their phone the whole time or something. But even within the scope of even taking that out, yeah, it's like there's a thing of agency and play is seen as like doing a large variety of things
Yeah,
and
yeah.
doing a large. Do you think that iteration is key to it? Like, if someone laid bricks the same way every time, could that still be play? Or as I'm saying this, I think I have my own stance on it, but curious what you think.
I don't know. This is sort of the other thing that I'm pointing to, because I'm like, if they get to their safety and that's like they feel really safe, and then the thing that they end up really wanting to do is just that kind of
Mm.
repetition. Um, I'm holding that as a hypothetical to as a way to like open up different ways of being, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
yeah,
Like the kid who lays bricks and potentially just does it again and again. The way of being about the bricks could be deeply playful.
yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's kind of the yeah. It kind of reminds like the chop wood carry water thing from like to
Yeah,
yeah. Would that does that feel right?
that feels right. Yeah. There's also
Yeah.
I'm also reminded of I don't think it's Mondrian. There's this like Italian. Maybe I can try find it. Uh, this is like guy, this Italian. Oh yeah, okay, it is Mondrian.
Hmm.
So Mondrian is this. Oh, maybe not. Actually, just kidding. No, this isn't the guy. Um, Morandi, Giorgio
Hmm.
Morandi. He does these like still lives for his entire life, which just looks like basically the same kind of beige thing.
You
And
want to pull
people
it up?
are, yeah, yeah, yeah. Let me try and I can see if I can share my screen. I might have
Yeah.
to restart it if I'm sharing my
Oh,
screen.
I can pull it up if you want to
Let
send it in
me.
the chat or something, if you can.
I can try. Uh, okay, so here we go.
Oh,
So is
interesting.
this guy? He's quite famous in the painting world, but like this is what is he's famous for. And you just look at
Oh.
it, and it's just like, well, it's just some random pieces of still life on his
Hmm.
table, and it's infinite variations of that, again and again and
Hmm.
again. And there's something about Visa has this idea around how for beginners the thing that often pulls them is novelty, and
Yeah.
so you're exploring and that kind of play. And for
Yeah.
experts, it's nuance.
Oh, wow. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I
That's cool.
love that tweet. I think about it
Yeah,
all
that's
the
cool.
time. And it seems like there's something similar going on here. And I wonder if sometimes it's not actually a like a stepwise thing. It's like
Yeah.
two different sort of paths that you can take and go between.
Yeah.
And some people are just a lot more, if you think about like Joe Dreams of Sushi, that sort of
Yeah.
old image of that person who's just focused on craft and making that one thing again and again and again.
Yeah.
Um, and you're not making variation, right? You're not trying to break the boundary like a Miles Davis. What you're
Yep.
doing is honing in on that well honed, very old craft and trying to
Yep.
reach perfection in that way. And there's
Yep.
something
Do,
about that attitude that actually feels more sort of you're aligning yourself to that higher thing.
yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I feel like when I was younger, there's not even when I was younger, like 5 years ago, uh, in the late 2010s, there was a lot of discussion on generalist versus specialist. Like that book Range came out, and everyone was like, "Oh, should you be a generalist? Oh, should you be a specialist? Oh, skill stacking. You can be top 10% in three things, or top 1% in one thing, or there's power laws, and then there's this, and just be a total general. There's all this stuff, and I think if you're really cognitive about it and you're trying to map or fit yourself to a narrative there, it can just fucking suck. And dude,
Yeah.
I remember spending so much time just suffering, not
Oh
like high grade
no.
suffering, but just like low grade
Yeah.
suffering, just like rolling around in my head thinking, "Oh, which one am I going to be? Who should I be? What should I be?" And I think it's like not that it was all useless, right? It was like somewhat useful, but and I think it is useful to think through, like, in terms of what markets value and what job stuff there is. There's like that whole thing, but when it hits into like the sense of self worth and the sense of who am I and
Hmm.
identity, that's when it ends up for me in my experience was more repressive than helpful. And in some sense, I almost feel like it's not even about if you're a generalist or a specialist or do the same thing 1,000 times or do 1,000 things one time. And I think over time one does get into like the subtlety. It goes from like novelty to subtlety. Course coarse to subtle. I think that's kind of a general principle. I do, and I agree with that. I almost just think the way it's instantiated really
Mm,
depends on the person. And if I look
yeah.
at my life now, like in some ways, I thought I was always like skipping around and doing a bunch of different things. Like I've had a bunch of different jobs, different industries, different things, and even within marketing, I've like done a bunch of different stuff. But then if I look at the things that haven't changed, I've basically always been into people and psychology and like phenomenology, and like,
Nice.
oh, cool. I'm just like way subtler and way more refined at doing all that stuff now than I ever was 5, 6 years ago. But again, this is only a narrative I can say looking backwards. I'm sure 10 years from now I'll have some other narrative about this time looking backwards.
Right.
But I do have a sense that like going from coarse to subtle and from like conceptual to phenomenological, basically everyone should just follow the Tao. Everyone should just kind of get into you gotta get out of your head, folks. Anyways, um, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, curious if you have any riffs on that.
Yeah. It's funny. I think I would have thought that by nature I was a lot more of a do one thing kind of guy. And
Mm,
then in college, I realized that actually the thing that I really liked was doing a bunch of shit.
yeah,
And
yeah,
my career right now is delightful to me and interesting to me because it's a mixture of some things kind of mushed
yeah,
together. Um, yeah, it really does feel like it depends. Uh, I often think about how like some people are born writers,
yeah.
and
Mm,
that's what their soul pulls them towards, and they'll even do it when it's really really painful, and they kind of hate
mm,
it, but like they just know that that's the thing. Um,
yeah,
I'm not that kind of guy.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's interesting to me. Like some people have this really deep pull, and
yeah,
it's not something you can manufacture. And some
yeah,
people are just like more sort of broad, loose. They kind of have to seek into these centers, but then they realize that they have multiple centers that they can go down on, and that's
yeah.
a different kind of negotiation.
For sure. Yeah, it's almost like that's helpful because I feel like that's kind of the more like to me with how that lands, it's you're pointing at kind of like the artist life or like the way
Yeah,
of the yeah artist is just kind of the thing that comes out or maybe yeah let's just go with artist. I think there's some other words potentially that could be used there, but like yeah, and to me it almost breaks me out of my frame a little bit where I do have this subtle thing of yeah everyone needs inner coherence and this all kind of works, but a lot of this is kind of just my own Enneagram 9 top down view of reality that's like, yeah, of course there's a monocausal thing that connects everything all together. When
yeah.
like no, there are people that are just born in a way with very different psyches. Theory of mind goes hard. Uh, yeah,
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 yeah. I
yeah,
I'm looking at a note here on Trickster, and
yeah.
uh, in Kat's piece, Kate. In her piece, she kind of talks about this. Take the shortcut. Do the thing
Yeah,
that's
right.
easy. Like find the leverage points. And
Mm,
one thing that I find really delightful about that is it's kind of pointing to uh, a kind of attunement that you necessarily have to have for how
mm,
systems work. Like, there's this great. Let me try and find it.
yeah.
Oh gosh, uh, it's on masks. Yin Cheng. Yin Cheng's has this book on. He has these like four masks. Maybe it's on Ribbon Farm. Okay, sick. Yeah, here it is. I'm gonna pull it up.
Yeah, try screen sharing. Otherwise, I can try.
Yeah, window. Here it is.
Nice.
So Ian Cheng happened to do a blog post on Ribbon Farm, but he has this really great book called Emissary's Guide to Welding, and
Mm,
it's a great book on its own. But like one of the pieces of that is talking about these four different masks that you can put on when you're sort of making art. And so I want to primarily talk about the hacker, where the hacker is the one that kind of seeks surprise. You're going into this unknown territory, and you're staring by gut, you're kind of finding that kind of intuition, that kind of really immediate sort of what is the strange, interesting, unexpected thing that you can do to sort of unveil the uh, see through the matrix is maybe one way to put it.
Mm,
And I've always found that interesting because in order to do this, you have to have a really, really deep knowledge, or
mm,
at least a very, very honed sense of intuition. And when you're applying that to yourself, of like, how can I make things as easy as possible? You have to both understand yourself really well, right? And understand your environment and the systems that you're trying to play with and dance with really well as well. And like the trickster as
mm,
an archetype, I really like because one of the ways to think about it, the tricksters are the coyotes and the ravens and so on, is that you have the predator who sets the traps and so well, you have the predator and then you have the prey. Like that's one dynamic, and one could think about the entire world in terms of predator and prey dynamics. And then you have the trickster who like fucks in between that and
mm,
like takes the dump in the trap and sort of just completely destroys those binaries. And like,
mm,
the trickster is the one who moves between boundaries and is the one who sets boundaries.
mm,
Um, and so like again, turning back to like Kat talking about the sort of how do you set your environment up in such a way that
mm,
you can thrive very naturally,
mm,
feels like a sort of pointing to how do you sense it to your own sense of boundaries and create structures such that it
mm,
supports that really well.
mm,
How do you actually break some of these internal dichotomies and actually feel into it, to find that really interesting in between
mm.
uh, solutions?
Yep. Yeah, I like that. It reminds me of your interest in improv as well, in impro, like the book.
Yeah,
Like I feel like I remember you a year or two ago were pretty on about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love Impro. It's one of my
Yeah,
favorite
yeah, yeah,
books.
yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and actually I'm kind of on that external environment thing. I put a note on that where yeah, I totally agree with you and I think that makes sense. Um and I think this is great because it does like yeah, obscuring the real machinery of motivation and the truth that if your life is well designed, it should feel easy to live up to your ideals rather than hard. It's like yes, I agree, and I think the lifestyle design stuff is good. I think the other element to it is just the developmental aspect and
Mm.
like one stance towards experience, which is basically just me plugging dharma or just plugging like wayfinding or contemplative practice or whatever. Yeah. So here's yeah, and then there is also a real thing, not just a lifestyle design, external, but the inner sense of coherence in the stance one cultivates towards their experience.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think Bruce. I was reading. Oh, actually, here it is. I was reading
Already free.
"Already Free" by Bruce
Great
Tift.
book.
Great book, great book. Yeah, and it's like it gets into the whole like, oh well, is there even a problem? Absolute nature, but also just kind of being at ease with the inherent contradiction between relative experience and the absolute, and just like there will
Mm.
be problems, and it's okay, and it may not always feel easy, but there's like a meta easy. Um,
Yeah.
or there
Nice.
can
Yeah.
be a meta ease that's cultivated potentially. Yeah, that's a better way of saying it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you think I plug Dharma too much?
Just the right amount.
Yeah, nice.
I think it's often unintuitive.
Yeah,
Uh, like, what do you mean you can both be at like fundamentally okay and still have practical problems? Is not
yeah,
actually something that makes a lot of sense often.
dude. Because I think the reason I'm so on about it is because I just like always, I think I just had some thing of like, well, what does enlightenment really mean? Like, does that mean I won't have any problems? Will I be okay? Just I think I just like from like 2016 to 2020 or something. I don't know. I just was 2021. I was just like, what is this thing? And does that mean you're perfect and everything is great? You just meet enough enlightened people, or people who just have enough like empty sense of self, and you're like, oh yeah, it's just you're just seeing stuff more clearly, which doesn't mean it means a lot, but also doesn't mean that much. I mean, it means a lot,
Right.
right? Of course, but yeah, yeah. So it's just fun to. It feels like the thing I can be on about for like years or something.
It's good. I've been reading. I just spent a while reading David Chapman's Vividness,
Oh, nice.
and the thing that I really like about that is it integrates both like the sort of spaciousness and also acting and having passionate.
Mm,
He calls it passionate connection. So you have
interesting.
spacious presence and passionate connection. And it's funny because I was on about the yin and yang thing, and then I
Yeah.
re-encountered that work, and I was like, oh, it's all already there,
Dude, that's
um,
crazy.
which is a beautiful thing.
Literally today, I was listening to a Robert Bea talk. He calls it not passionate connection, but just like some passion of something.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. Dude, that's so coincidental. It's Robert Bea, the world and more, immanence, tantra, and transcendence, and he just
Ooh,
gets deep into
ooh, that's a good
yes,
title.
immanence. Um, oh, it doesn't really have a description really, but yeah, it's good. It just gets into that whole like you can be in the sense of spaciousness and just enjoy. It's almost like not seeing from the Theravada lens of contraction as purely suffering, but as
Hmm.
of contraction as play, contraction
Hmm.
as like
Hmm.
passions, contractions as like your desires from a more I know there's a Buddhist word for it, but like more of the wholesome desires, or really just owning one's desires as like the way one paints the brush on experience or something.
Yeah,
And yeah, there's like a much more artistic, open, vivid way of seeing when that is there more.
I do wonder if it's possible to. So Chapman talks about unclogging energy
Mm.
through the unification of spaciousness and passion. And
Mm. Mm.
an interesting thing about that is if you look at it from Tantra, everything has, maybe I'm butchering this, but like
Yeah, yeah.
there's a
We
thing
are.
of,
We're just
we're
dumb
always already butchering
students. We're
it.
not. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
uh, there is, so like, for example, you have clenching, and that is an energetic movement. And the difference between the sort of wisdom form of that and the non-wisdom form of that is whether or not it's kind of unified and unclogged. Um,
Mm.
sorry, whether it's unclogged through unifying the
Mm.
emptiness
Mm.
and form. Uh, and I would be curious about like, when you're stuck, when somebody's doing work and they're feeling all of these things, or like when
Mm.
they
Mm.
feel a lack of want and desire,
Yeah.
uh, any sense of even that kind of, like you said, the sort of resistance is just a want in another form. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
like putting on the stance that every single energetic sense is a pull towards something,
Yes.
and a wisdom form.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. No. Exactly. So in a lot of ways, what I'm trying to impart is that in some ways the classical tantra worldview of just see like and you know you could even just take it from a no bad parts. There's no bad energies. There's no bad. It's all just energy. You know, it's all just potential action, just in different directions. So might as well try to unify it.
Right.
Might as well try to understand it. Were you asking if what if I might have missed this? Were you asking what if there wasn't any resistance, or what if someone just didn't know what they wanted at all?
That would have been my follow up. I think there's
Yeah.
something like, I think often people would view, oh, there's this resistance. This means that like I'm blocked from my
Yep.
want.
Yeah.
Versus like actually the resistance itself is a want. Like all of the sensations, if you have sensation, is a desire and a pull towards something. So like you already have willpower. It's just it's split.
Yep. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I basically think like this is very common, especially if someone's in a shutdown response,
Yeah.
and especially I think like for example, I think after some retreat, I realized I was basically in a low grade depression for years, where I was just like, oh,
Damn.
why am I so low energy? It's because I'm just like literally just suppressing myself all the time, and there's just all
Mm.
this inner conflict all the time. There's all this chronic stress from like family stuff and random stuff like all the time, and there's one way of viewing things that like everything is an internal response. That's kind of true. That obviously, if someone is in like financial stress or like familial stress or physical stress, yes, you could operate on the level of, well, what if you were just okay with that and that wasn't a problem? half the time that's just not the level that's appropriate for the situation,
Mhm.
and there just is a lot of intensity from external that is causing internal intensity, but it's better to work on the external stuff. Um, anyways, that whole spiel aside, yeah, you can kind of just be in like a burnout state or an overwhelmed state where it feels like there's no energy or it's just total numbness,
Mm.
and that's just really hard. I think from that space, it's harder to notice the wants or notice resistance because it's just all a lot, and it's typically a better lever or higher leverage to just rest and actually
Mm.
learn how to have deep rest. So I tend to prescribe or just like advocate for like yoga nidra as a practice a lot.
Mm.
And because basically like learning how to ground and learning how to resource oneself is a skill and I think can be practiced. And I think especially when you have a reliable method of cool, I can feel better if I do this thing. That can become its own trap because you're like forcing it. But
Right.
yeah, that's helpful. And also just like, yeah, I was like like 2 years ago, I was super burnt out for a couple of months because of some external stressors. And I just went on a retreat and I cried for like 4 days. And that just like
Nice.
really helped. And then I felt great. I didn't even
Yeah.
realize you could do that. That was my first time. Like, yeah, yeah. I got
Awesome.
COVID on day one of the retreat, so I was like siloed away. And then I just had a little cabin to myself, which is kind of nice because I didn't really want to. Yeah. Anyways, it was nice because I actually just kind of wanted to do my own thing anyway. And
Right.
then I just ended up crying and like journaling for like 3 days, and that let out a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Interesting. So
Yeah,
the model, the like depression is not actually, well,
yeah,
something
yeah.
like the depressive, really low energy states is not that you're lacking it, but actually there is so much such that you have to suppress it all
Yes,
the way down.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. And this is like, I mean, it comes from the ontology, maybe not the ontology, but from the worldview of like there is the fun one your fundamental nature is Rigpa and Buddha nature and effervescent energy all the time, whatever, right?
Hmm.
So it's like from that worldview, how can there be less energy? There just has to be not in the system.
Mm.
Um, I get that there's like hormones and physiological stuff and brain state chemistry stuff, and I don't think I know enough about that to say if that fits in. Like again, it's probably still very useful to operate at those levels and to intervene at those levels.
Hmm.
And at some point, it becomes much more useful to intervene at the resistance and not level. I think.
Mm. Nice.
Yeah,
Checks out.
checks out. That's my take. And yeah, like this is not like maybe a totally coherent frame, but it's something like the sense. It's like balancing sensitivity and equanimity, and like if you like go too much into sensitivity, sensory clarity without the enough equanimity, it's like overwhelming. And you get back
Mm.
into a shutdown response. Like if someone just does hardcore vipassana, like a Goenka retreat, to like cure their like super intense depression, it might work, but it'd be super painful throughout the whole
Yeah.
process. Versus like slow and steady IFS type stuff, plus like nervous system calming, plus like
Mm.
spacious practice. I don't know. Who know, everyone has their own path, but I'm very pro smooth path.
Sick.
Yeah.
I'm curious to get like uh, a generalized sort of if else statement around unblocking yourself. So,
Yeah.
for instance, if uh, I'm looking back at the essay, there's something around like
I can pull it up too.
um, safety seems like a big
Yeah.
piece. Safety and being grounded, being able to hold the charge in your body,
Yep.
maybe,
Yep.
um, and that's maybe step one, such that you can being able to hold the charge in your body, and eventually that gets towards being able to have the different energies, the different resistances, and things like that clarify. And then eventually, once you do that enough, they will resolve themselves.
Yep.
Does that kind of map to
Yes.
your process? Yeah.
Yeah, to my specific process, yes, actually quite closely. I would say a better, more general one is really just Romeo Stevens' thing. Um,
Nice.
maybe it's not like exactly right because it doesn't totally get the details of it, But like I really do think that like, you know, create the conditions for insight. Insight helps you find interrelational patterns, which then lets you concentrate more. Yeah, this is like kind of close. I almost think that there should be one, like maybe concentration should be safety, like, and then
Mm,
safety creates agency. Agency creates like, allowing for more intensity. I don't know. Maybe that's not exactly right either, but yeah, yeah. There's something there. Um,
maybe we can try and point to the main bottlenecks that you often see people run into.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Actually, and I've been having dude, yeah. This is like I've just been storing all these in my little folder for a while.
Nice.
Um, uh, yeah. Wife has procrastinated emails, emotional hangups, emotional
Hmm.
capacity is a bottleneck when we're often overcoming fear in the context of corporate communication. I'm just like, yeah, this one's so great. Anita's thing recently, it's like procrastinate about something, further resist, get curious, track it, notice its energy
Yeah.
sensations. Okay, I want to work now. This is literally my entire thing. I just help people do this. That's like all I do. Just a bunch of random. Yeah, I've been feeling a thing I've been avoiding for 8 months and took 45 seconds to pass through. Uh, it's just like in the water, man. I just think
Yeah.
everyone is touching on it, but there's just not like a thing that's uh like pointing to the connection between all of it. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here, but it's not quite there yet at like a legible here's the thing.
Right.
But yeah, hopefully the more I do these sessions, the more I'll like get clear on it as like a research project.
Yeah. Because I'm super curious about like beginning to see the patterns, right? Because for
Yeah,
some
yeah, yeah.
people it might be I can't I when I try and feel into it, I just get overwhelmed and so uncomfortable that I can't even sit
Yep,
with it. And then
yep,
I would assume for other people they kind of like sit with it for a while, but somehow for some reason it doesn't move or something.
yep,
And that may be another category of problem. Like
yep.
mapping that space out.
100%. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's great. So I think there is some developmental stuff here, and working at Journey and even at Odyssey, I think there is a bit of that I already noticed. Like
Hmm.
there's a range of responses to people who did well on Journey retreats, and I think a lot of the functions there, like you saw, like Nadia Asparahova is like one day hit all genres, whatever. Right? I think it's like if you have a I think inner coherence, it kind of comes down to that. You can't
Hmm.
really ask people about inner coherence, like it doesn't make much sense. But if like
Right.
it's almost like what's on your mind, like how many things are bothering you right now. For some people, it's like not that many. For most people, it's like a lot of stuff, or it's like
Hmm.
almost an endless list. So the more open loops there are, actually, yeah, this is one hypothesis I have. Like one way to potentially measure it is like the intensity and the number of someone's open loops at any given moment. Open loops meaning like random decisions, thoughts, actions. And when there's a lot of internal friction from like a parts perspective, there are just a lot more open loops at the level of like existential problems versus over time as someone gets more safe and attuned and relaxed, the open loops one they just kind of go away and there's just a lot more like brain empty, space empty kind of thing. Or the open loops that do arise just are at the level of like very minor tasks or something that
Hmm.
eventually will be collected by the system. I have noticed that like there are people who have more a lot going on, and then this thing I advocate for is like not to go into the whole mess because it's better to do that like a IFS setting and almost like downshift into just like how do we just get this work done with a little bit more noticing. And there's
Hmm.
people with a lot more access or with a lot more clarity for one, um, and then it's like cool maybe we can see if we can bring a sense of that clarity to make work a lot more enjoyable, not
Hmm.
just like bearable and get through it, but like whoa you actually can get like jhana bliss or like non-dual space from while actually doing the task. So those are that's like one spectrum.
Hmm.
Another spectrum is like emotional fluidity. So some people may temporarily be in a state of like really intense, but then they have a lot of emotional fluidity from doing a lot of practices, so they can flush it out really quick. Other
Hmm.
people just maybe just happen to be pretty good and life isn't too difficult, but they don't have the emotional fluidity skill. So if it ever did get difficult, it just take a lot more time to like debug and deconstruct. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So those are two. There's the coherence and fluidity are like two axes I would like to learn how to map out. And I know journeys figure out how to map it out. I think psychedelic people are trying to figure out how to map it out. I think like intake for IFS therapists, that'd be really cool to see how to map it out. So yeah.
What do you think about so some people are so there's kind of like generally two sides of the spectrum. One side is like you keep on doing consistent work even when you don't feel really good, and
Yeah.
that's how you get things done. Some people seem to actually work quite well with that, and then you have the other kind of having seasons, right? Like huge
Yeah.
bursts and then downshifts. What do you think is happening there?
Dude, I mean, I still am a little bit unclear about this because sometimes I'm like, well, I'm not a YC founder that knows how to work 24/7. Should I really be advocating and being a coach for people on their productivity if I'm not like the most productive person ever? You know what I mean? That's like a thought I have, and it, as I say it out loud, it kind of doesn't make much sense, but it also does kind of make some sense. Like maybe there's things I'm missing on the nature of productivity and on like what good work should be. Um, how I've answered that for now is people have different conditionings. So there are some people, due to all their experiences, from maybe you can take the persona of someone growing up in the Bay Area and going to a bunch of intense schools, and you go to Stanford and you go to YC. You kind of just learned how to work in a place, maybe conditioned, maybe free. You know, who knows on the nature of how it is, but you might just be able to do a lot of intense stuff, many actions per minute, many times per day for a long period of time, um, for years. Oftentimes, I would say that's probably coming from a sense of suppression or coercion, and there's can be a price to be paid when doing that. I know multiple people who've had to spend years in recovery from that. I think there's kind of the phenomena of like, especially in Teapot, you go to MIT, post MIT, you get really into somatics and bodywork stuff or, you know, whatever, because it's like super intense and you actually like learn how to like go into this new way of being. So that's like a whole thing. And like, but maybe some people just do that their whole life and are actually just fine and actually just okay. But I'd say that's a matter of conditioning. And then there's kind of like everyone else. I don't want to say like, I don't want to put in dichotomy because I do think people can move into that way. But if it doesn't come naturally, you kind of just have to build that capacity. For me, I've just spent so many years trying to force myself into that capacity and that just doesn't work. But what works more is when I go the surrender route and the more yin route and kind of like having more spontaneity emerge. And there's like, then I think Paul Miller talks about this a lot with like pathless path and good work, where it's like if you just embrace where you're at, and like this is the whole Joe Hudson thing too. If you just embrace where you're at, naturally the natural state is one of flow, excitement, and joy and exploration. When there's safety and you're like naturally there, you're gonna want to just do cool stuff. The way that manifests may not be totally in line with what is conventionally good, but like every person's life has their own constraints. So it's like if you've always wanted to like pay your rent, you're not going to magically not want to pay your rent or something, you know, or like if you've always wanted to like save up so your kids go to private school, I doubt that want really changes unless it was like not a full want. Yeah. So this is a bit of a ramble, but I almost am like, if you want to change it, just try and see what happens. I think you can. And then there's a whole environmental thing. Like, yeah, maybe if you go to a coding boot camp, you like can learn to become a type of person that can work 80-hour weeks and stuff. I do know that's definitely a thing. But then like, yeah, if you try that and it's just like you're just like forcing it, then maybe you got to try something different. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to make any like top down claims, but just like experiment and try out and see how it lands in your system is kind of the more general thing. But yeah, yeah, was that clarifying or was that a bit too rambly?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
As I'm hearing you talk, it feels almost irrelevant.
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah,
It's like that
yeah.
thing you were talking about before of you're a generalist or a specialist. It's like forcing yourself to be either doesn't
In a
isn't actually the
box.
right move. Yeah.
Like there may be times where like visually you can pattern match to be a generalist or visually you're pattern match to be a specialist, but it just feels so contextual. Actually, back to the essay. Dude, I actually think Kate did a great job of this. I think Kate did an awesome job of this. Of yeah, like this whole thing. in undergrad, I earned 2 degrees while working multiple
Yeah.
jobs. I was drinking alone. And then it's like, at any one of these, you could be like, oh, she's a grinder, or she's like, lazy, or oh, she's a failure, oh, she's a winner, like type A person, type B person. Like, I don't know. I just think all those labels and stuff just like reify in a way that like maybe is useful, but fundamentally just isn't real. It's just so much more about the context, and I just think that view is just so much more empowering than like I am like this. This is how it is, kind of thing.
This is so, yeah, because now it's like, okay, so everything ideally, if you can figure out how to do bottom up and feeling to it and align, all of the boxes becomes very Buddhist. All of the
Yeah,
boxes are views and stances that you
yeah,
can take. And the
yeah,
reason why they're good is because they're legible. And so you know how to phase shift into that deliberately
yeah,
rather
yeah,
than
yeah, yeah.
needing to first principles figure everything out. But if you get
Yes,
stuck on it and reify it, then it might suck a lot.
yeah. Like, and this is all exact. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's kind of like a Keegan. I mean, I don't know if it's a Keegan 5 thing, but it's like maybe Keegan 4 or 5 or whatever, where like you're kind of moving between roles and like moving between senses of selves in a very fluid way. Where, and this is where it's like enlightenment's not going to solve all your problems if you're just like in a cave in Indonesia for like 12 years, because this is fundamentally about stuff in the world. Like, because YC exists, because like HF0 exists, and like SF is a culture, like fractal tech is a thing. Like, there are structures where you can have certain conditions and you can like be a different person in those places. And it's really, really good for the world to have different contexts for you to be a different kind of person in those places. And it's even better if you can kind of like have the sense of agency and choice over knowing that by being in those places you'll become a different person. I think that's just the thing I'm advocating for. It's like, just bring awareness to it, choice, and a sense of experimentation. And all these things end up just being good. It's almost like I used to think polygram essays were like repressive or like, because my inner critic would like jumble up against it. But now it's just like I read those and like, oh yeah, this is great. This is awesome. This is very inspiring and good. Yeah, how's that land for you?
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
nice. Should we call it?
Yeah, let's call
Let's
it.
call it. Sweet man.
Thanks, Pranab.
Yeah,
It's a good
thanks,
time.
dude. Good time. Let me pause this.